Hi, in this video, I'm going to review the stories in Steeler's Sky. This is the 12th and final book in the original Thieves World series. Robert Lynn Asprin wrote the introduction story in this book, and it focuses on Zalbar the Hellhound. He's having lunch and thinking about all the ways Sanctuary has changed since he first arrived with Prince Governor Catechithus. He also puts a little thought into what's happening with the rank and empire itself. After wondering if he needs to do anything, he decides to just wait and see what happens and then react in the moment. It's not really anything here story-wise. Zalbar is just navel-gazing about recent events. I'd give this a 4 out of 10. The first real story is called Night Work, and it's by Andrew Offit, and it focuses on Hans, aka Shadowspawn. Offit uses a couple other characters he created in this one too. Audio is the owner of Sly's Place, and Spellmaster Strick of Faraka runs a business helping people with magic. The story starts with Hans making his way through Sanctuary and thinking about the recent attempt to sell him into slavery. He knows who grabbed him and has reasoned out who put them up to it. The story is basically about Hans getting his revenge on the people that tried to take his freedom. There is one scene that goes on far too long, and the information that someone gives Hans in it didn't really come into play unless it was just meant to set up the very last paragraph in the story. Hans still refuses to kill if it isn't necessary, which is good. His big cat, Notable, is sort of charming, but some of the scenes were obviously meant to display the relationship between the two of them. I'd rate this story a 7 out of 10. I did enjoy the story, but there was nothing that made me say wow. The second story is called The Incompetent Audience and is John DeClass's second entry in the Thieves World setting. Once again, we're dealing with the theater troupe and the trials they go through to put on a play in Sanctuary. This time, they're dealing with a nasty critic named Vomistritus, who is putting up flyers around the town saying that the troupe is terrible. There are some hijinks related to flyers and glue, a dog that can do tricks, and then a wealthy lady that agrees to act in the play, and a much more serious issue that gets covered in this one. I enjoyed this story. The main character, Feltherin, the master thespian, is a good guy, though he's not above getting a little dirty if necessary. The other characters each have a distinct personality, so you can usually tell who's doing or saying what without any confusion. The story has both a comical aspect and a serious one, and the events are played out at a good pace up until the last part. The resolution did feel a little rushed, but this might just be the author's style because I remember feeling the same way about his previous story. That was called The Power of Kings, and it was in Thieves World Book 11, Uneasy Alliances. I'm rating this one a 7 out of 10 and adding Feltherin to the list of decent people in Sanctuary, alongside Hans the Thief, Lalo the Artist, Delira the Fortune Teller, Audio the Bar Owner, and Strick the White Mage. The next story is the only Dwayne McGowan in any of the anthologies. The story is also the only entry on his ISFDB page, so I'm guessing maybe it was fan fiction that got published, or he was friends with one of the authors and wrote something they liked, so they put it in the book. I don't really know. If you know more info, put it in the comments for me. The story is called Our Vintage Years. A woman named Marriott is going to Sanctuary with her grandchildren and someone that's helping her out. Marriott's husband used to own a successful winery near Rank, the capital city of the Rankin Empire. When Theron usurped the emperor's throne, Marriott's husband was killed. However, all was not lost when they fled because she has a batch of what is now very rare wine and plans to get back into the business. This is a likable story and I enjoyed it quite a bit. The author puts just enough introspection and reflection into the various viewpoints to make the motivations clear, and those lead to concrete actions by each character. The beginning is a little slow because some past events are told through Marriott's point of view to set up the rest of the story. After that, the plot moves along at a good pace until it reaches a nice resolution. My one complaint about the story would be that the main bad guy was a little stupid meeting with his thugs in a public place to tell them what to do. But on the other hand, it was a noisy place they were meeting in, and it was implied that they had done similar jobs before using similar arrangements, so maybe it had always been safe for them to do that. I liked the story's resolution and how everything wrapped up. I'm rating this one a strong 6 out of 10 because of the pacing, the characterization, and plot that was entertaining without being overly complicated. Next up, we've got Lalo the Limner returning once more in Diana L. Paxson's story called Quicksilver Dreams. The main plot of this one revolves around many characters and everyone around those characters having bad dreams. People come to Lalo and his mage apprentice Darius to see if they can get help. Darius thinks an execution might help get rid of whatever ghosts are haunting everyone. Unfortunately, he's wrong. This story has just about the right number of moving parts. The plot doesn't get too intricate, and it moves along in a linear way, so the reader doesn't have to wonder what order the scenes really happened in. Lalo is being Lalo, and he has a little battle of wills with High Priest Malin Torchholder, which gets resolved by the story's end. Astute readers will immediately know what's causing the bad dream, so there isn't a lot of mystery here. The real mystery is how they'll stop it, and I like the solution that the author came up with. This is another story that has a good pace, though it's quieter than Our Vintage Years was. I would rate this one a 6 out of 10 as well, though it wasn't quite as strong as Our Vintage Years was. That may be it for our pal Lalo the Limner. Dinah L. Paxson does have stories in Turning Points and Enemies of Fortune, which are the Thieves World anthologies that came out in 2002 and 2004 respectively. However, I didn't see Lalo's name when I did a quick scan of the stories in those books. I did see the name of his daughter Latilla though, so maybe there will be reference to him somewhere in there. C.J. Cherry wrote the next story, Winds of Fortune. This one starts off with stepsons Stratton and Critias getting in an argument about his shade. Then it jumps to a shade and what she's up to. Many of the viewpoints in this story revolve around Shade's desire for Stratton, since he seems to be the only living man that she can sleep with that doesn't die. I really can't say much more than that without spoiling the story. There's some characterization in this and a bit of navel gazing, though it didn't go on for too long as it often did in the past stories. Critias is angry, Stratton is conflicted, Shade is lonely and tragic in a kind of way that's always been there through all the stories. This story is really just a continuation of the soap opera about the Critias, Stratton, Ishade love triangle, too. There's a resolution that seems final in this story, and you'd think I'd give it a higher rating since this plotline is finally over, as far as I can tell. However, I just can't rate it any higher than a 5 out of 10 because I just don't care about Stratton or Critias. I wouldn't mind seeing more stories with Ishade, but I'm afraid they'd all be more of the same. The next story is the 95th story in the original 12 Thieves World books. That's a lot of stories. Its title is The Fire in a God's Eye, and it was written by returning author Robin Wayne Bailey. Chenea the Gladiator left Sanctuary 7 months ago and finally returns to find out that someone she loves has died. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a lot of time to mourn because she has a jewel that needs to be mounted in the Temple of Savankala as soon as possible, and she can't utter a sound until that deed is done. The story is fun and has plenty of action. Multiple plot lines involve Chenea, her gladiator friend Darren, Princess Daphne, and High Priest Malin Torchholder. There really isn't a slow moment in this story once Chenea gets close to Land's End, which is her father's estate. This one has death, religious rituals, angry demons, a running battle, subterfuge, and an angry high priest. One of my favorite things about this entire story is that it uses something that happened way, way back in the story, The Face of Chaos, in the very first Thieves World book. I'll leave it up to you to discover what that is, though. This was my favorite story in this volume, and I'd rate it an 8 out of 10. The penultimate story in the original 12 books is called Web Weavers and was written by Lynn Abbey. The main character is Garrison Commander Wallagren. He isn't thrilled that he's in a supervisory role now, but he gets out and patrols when he can. A base of merchant ship arrives, and he and another soldier named Thrusher end up helping a woman that seems to fear doing something wrong and making her brother-in-law angry. The story's just kind of so-so. Wallagren comes across like he's just going through the motions because he's to the point where he's counting the days to his retirement in a few years. He's feeling lonely, thinking about taking a wife. He's just not in a good place. The main woman in the story shows a little personality in the beginning and the middle, but I thought the last scene really collapsed the strength and determination that she showed earlier in the story. There is some tension in the story, but it lacks action, and it's really disappointing that this one is the next to last story in this setting. I probably would have put it a little closer to the beginning of the book if I were organizing the table of contents, but hey, I'm just a guy on the internet that can only vouch for what I like, so what do I know? Pretty much nothing about editing an anthology, I can tell you that. At best, I can only give Web Weavers a 4 out of 10. Robert Lynn Asprin took the honor of writing the final story in the original 12 books. This one is called To Begin Again. Hakim has been advising the base of Schuppanzee for years now. This story starts with Hakim having a few drinks at the Vulgar Unicorn and contemplating an assignment Schuppanzi wants him to take. There's a flashback detailing the conversation he had with both Schuppanzi and Prince Katakithis about the assignment. While Hakim's sitting there having a drink, an unexpected person joins Hakim at his table in the Vulgar Unicorn and makes a proposal of his own. Like the previous story, this one doesn't have any action either. The entire story is mostly interior monologue or external dialogue. However, as I read it, there were many things it made possible for future stories, so I enjoyed it a lot. I would rate this final story a 7 out of 10. So that's all the stories in Steeler's Sky. The first 3 stories had the bad guy getting their just desserts in the end. Most of the rest were more character driven and didn't have crazy action, even though a couple of them were pretty entertaining. Overall, I thought this book was par for the course with respect to Thieves World. It would have been nice if the entire series had wrapped with a bang-up adventure involving people like High Priest Malin Torchholder, Shadow Spawn the Thief, Strick the White Magician, and Lalo the Limner, but that didn't happen. I'd rate Steeler's Sky a 6 out of 10. I'll be doing a wrap-up video where I talk about all 12 of the original books and giving my overall impressions of Thieves World as a whole. I'm not completely done with Thieves World, though. Released in 1989, Steeler's Sky was the last of the original 12-book Thieves World series. 13 years later, in 2002, Lynn Abbey released a full-length novel called Sanctuary, which apparently takes place years later and only Malin Torchholder is around from these original days. That same year, a new anthology called Turning Points was also released. Many of the authors in it weren't part of the first series. In 2004, another book titled Enemies of Fortune was released with even more stories. Between the 2 anthologies, there are 24 more Thieves World stories to read and review. Since they supposedly don't have many of the characters from the original 12 books, I don't feel a compelling reason to keep going with those books right away. I'll be taking a break from Thieves World for a while. I need it after these original 12. I'll be using the time to get some variety in the reviews here by focusing on other anthologies and short story collections. I hope you've enjoyed this review and have checked out others on my channel. If you have contrary thoughts, think I missed something, or just want to leave a comment, please leave them in the comments section below. Bye for now.